For the most part, Football Manager is a game known for getting its player ratings pretty accurate in-game, even going as far as predicting youngsters' meteoric rises years before we see it happen on the real-life stage. They are usually very, very good when it comes to player ratings. However, there are some exceptions to this case, and today I'm going to be looking at them. Players that are so good in-game, but in real life just aren't that good. Now, do bear in mind, these players are mainly Premier League players, because that's where my knowledge base is, so I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Who do you think is one of the most overrated players in FM? Make sure you like the video if you enjoy, and let's get in to player number one. And we start off with the one, the only Dominic CalvertLloyd, and I imagine most of you watching at home are nodding your head right now going, yeah, I agree with that, because this guy is one of the most talked about players in Football Manager. In real life, there's no doubt the Everton striker is a good player when fit. I know he spent a few years injured, but before those injuries, he was scoring goals on a pretty regular basis. I mean, he's got 11 England caps, 4 goals. This is clearly a good striker, and I wouldn't mind if he was a good striker in FM. But in FM, this guy is like one of the world's best forwards, one of the best strikers you'll ever use, a guaranteed 30 goal a season player, instantly, right from the off, no development. He's strong, he's quick, he's great in the air, he's got great finishing ability, at the first touch, the heading, the mental attributes are off the charts too. He can pass pretty well, he's got great technique and work rate. There is not a flaw in this man's game, and genuinely, if you stuck him at Real Madrid in Football Manager, he would fit right in with Vinicius, with Bellingham, with all of these crazy players, because in-game, he is just rated so highly. He seems to play well in every single match engine. So I definitely think DCL is one of the most overrated players in FM, and just to say it again, by saying that this guy's overrated and for all of the players coming, I'm not saying they're bad players by any means. I just think in FM, they are far too good for how they should be. And the same goes for my next player, Scott McTominay. Clearly a decent level player, but in Football Manager, he has some of the best attributes you will see in-game from a box-to-box midfielder, and he's proved for Manchester United last season he can come up with a goal here and there, even though sometimes his game can be a bit lacking. He is a decent squad-level player at Manchester United, starts the game in FM on the transfer list, but despite all of that, in Football Manager, this guy has got attributes to be the next Yaya Toure in-game. I mean, the guy has got insane physical attributes. He's quick, he's strong, he's got everything he needs physically. He's also tall, being 6'4", he's great in the air. He's got the finishing ability that most strikers would dream to have. He's got brilliant aggression, bravery, determination, teamwork, work rate, off the ball, leadership. He's a good passer with 14 tackling as well. Yes, his vision is pretty weak in game. That is pretty much it. The guy's got great first touch, dribbling ability. Not only is he great physically and mentally, but he's great on the ball. He's great defensively too. He can score goals. This guy in game is genuinely an elite level midfielder, one of the world's best when it comes to his attributes. But in real life, he definitely isn't that. So that's another overrated player for my list. But a player that I think has been overrated for a few years in FM is Edouard. Crystal Palace's striker, formerly of Celtic, where he was banging goals in the Scottish divisions, 21 goals in 1 year, 18 in the next. Then he got his move to Palace, and as you can see by the numbers, it hasn't quite gone to plan. The guy is not really a first choice striker for them. Obviously they've got Mateta doing well now, but over the last few years when they were crying out for a striker, Edouard was just not that man. And in Football Manager, he definitely is. I mean, I've done a rebuild with Aston Villa on my channel, which by the way, if you want to check it out, you can find that in the description. But every single season, Edouard was in the top 2 goal scorers in the league, only being beaten by Man City's Erling Haaland. Edouard in game is just an unreal player. I don't know what it is about him, he just seems to perform at a super high level, probably because he's got really well-rounded physical attributes, and this year they tend to be the thing that determines if a player is good in game or not. But outside of that, he's got great finishing, dribbling, first touch. He is an elite level striker. I just don't think he quite is in real life. So for me, Edouard is definitely an overrated pick. The next player I think many people will say is the most overrated player in-game. It's none other than Marcus Rashford. Now, I'll preface this by saying I think Rashford is a good player. Do I necessarily think he should be the man Manchester United rely upon every season? Definitely not, but he has been a good servant to them for a few years, been one of the better players in their squad, and as you can see in 22-23 season, he was exceptional. He's been an England international with 16 goals and 53 caps, not bad at all. So he is clearly a good player, but outside of that, you know, I don't think many people would say he's one of the best in the Premier League, whereas Football Manager would go further than that and say he is one of the best in the world. I would argue, maybe outside of Vinicius Jr., if you're trying to look for an inside forward, someone that's going to score goals from the left, Marcus Rashford is probably the best there is. I mean, the guy is electric physically, great pace. He's got really good strength as well, which surprises me. And the acceleration, the agility, the mental attributes are all there. 18 flair. I know he's quite a tricky player, but is he necessarily 18 flair worthy? I'm not so sure. His work rate is quite low, but he's got great off the ball work, anticipation, decision making isn't the best, but it's still decent, composure too. But then he's got 16 penalties, 14 passing, 15 technique, 16 finishing, 15 dribbling, 14 first touch. Now I like Marcus Rashford, but I do not think he is this good. In game, he is arguably one of the best players in the world, and if you've seen him in Football Manager, you know that if you use him, or there's a team in your league that uses him, he will be one of the best players in the league, season in, season out. Now I know last season wasn't the best for him under Ten Hag, but even outside of that, I'm comparing this player that we're seeing on screen to the Rashford that did really well the season before, and even there, I think the FM version of Rashford is far too good for how he is in real life. So for me, Rashford is another overrated player, as is Patrick Schick, one of the few players in this list that isn't a Premier League player. Again, most of my knowledge base is the Premier League, but over the years, I've seen a bit of Patrick Schick. He's been around for quite a while now. I've seen him a lot on an international stage, and he has been one of those players that has moved around quite a lot. Obviously spent quite a lot of time in Italy and wasn't really the best. I mean, Sampdoria did pretty well there, actually very good for a club like them, 11 goals in 32, but the season after plays 22 times for Roma, scores twice. He then goes to Leipzig and has a good season, scoring pretty much a goal every 2 games, gets a big move to Bayer Leverkusen, where he has been a pretty decent player for them, particularly in 21-22. Now I know he has spent a lot of his season injured, but he's now not really considered their best striker. Boniface by most would be considered their starting man. But Patrick Schick in Football Manager is a god. The guy is insane when it comes to his physicals. He has got everything he needs to be an unbelievable player, but then he gets given 16 first touch, 16 heading, 15 finishing, 16 technique, really good mental attributes as well, and if you've used him in game, you will know this guy is insane. Now again, I do think he is a good player, he is a good striker, but he's not one that many consider when they think of that world-class striker bracket, whereas in Football Manager, much like Calvert-Lewin, for some reason, he just is. Every single save, you will see this guy score incredible numbers. I'm not saying he's not capable of doing that in real life. He has proved he can have the odd season where he does really well, but in Football Manager, it is every year. This guy is insane. This next pick is a weird one, because all the players I've looked at so far, I think the wider FM community will all agree with me, whereas this Patson Daka pick is a bit more of my own knowledge coming in here, a bit more than some of the others, because Daka, I mean, he might not be the one that you see in FM all the time scoring loads of goals, but I'm from Leicester and I've seen him play a lot in real life over the last few years. He does not have 15 finishing. I don't know who's given him this at Sports Interactive. I know he was pretty good when he was at Salzburg, had some really good seasons for them, amazing seasons in fact. Then he comes to Leicester, doesn't really do all that much, and in the Championship this year, yes, he did score goals, but for most of the season, he was the main man in Enzo Maresca's team, and he missed countless chances, and I mean countless chances. I think fair enough, his pace is fine, you know, he is clearly a player that relies upon that, he is a hard worker, I mean his decision making is probably pretty accurate at 10, everything else I can kind of forgive. He is not an amazing player, but he's a good player when it comes to using that pace and being a quick forward. Despite all of that though, 15 finishing is the thing that I've got an issue with. This should be more like 11, maybe 10, maybe 12 if you want to push it. I know he had some good seasons at Salzburg, but that's 3 years now in the Premier League where he's proved that even if he had that finishing in the past, he does not anymore. I say in the Premier League, 1 season was spent in the Championship with Leicester in the most recent year, but you get what I'm saying. This guy, I mean, he is really hit and miss. 15 finishing is very high for him. That needs to be lowered, and for that reason, Patson Daka is an overrated player. And there seems to be something in the water at Manchester United because we've covered Rashford and McTominay, and there's a few others that I could have considered as overrated players, but the one that had to be in this list for me was Antony. Now, I know he gets a lot of stick online, and a lot of people dig into him, and I'm not necessarily an Antony hater, mind you, but I definitely think in FM, he is far too good, because in-game, he makes that £82 million Man U paid for him look pretty good, because he plays really well. Like, he is a world-class talent in FM, and maybe he will be for Man U in real life, but I think most people would agree he's probably not going to get there. There's some attributes that I'm fine with. I mean, flair could potentially even be higher. His decision making is low, that's fair enough. And he is a hard worker, I can agree with that. His passing, maybe on the high side, but for me, to have crossing at 14 and finishing at 12, I think both of them need to be lowered. I haven't seen him take a free kick for United, so that might be wrong of me. I've seen him hit lots of long shots this season and miss many of them, so I think that needs to be lowered a little bit. But whatever it is, Anthony is just on crack in FM. He seems to be amazing in game, and I just don't think he is. And I think many people agree. In real life, this guy is not as good as FM makes him. And don't get me started on Darwin Nunes, a player that Liverpool spent a lot of money on, and I actually think is a very good player when I watch him. He is clearly lacking some elements to his game that he needs to improve upon. His decision making, his finishing in front of goals. He's been at Liverpool now for a couple of seasons, and you want to start seeing a little bit more from him. And I'm fine with him being a good player in FM, but tell me why in Football Manager this guy is like one of the world's best strikers. I don't know what it is. All the guys I'm covering today, Schick, CalvertLloyd, in game just play like absolute animals. And Darwin Nunes is another that will hit like 25 goals a season, 30 goals a season consistently in the Premier League, where he is never really going to do that in real life by the looks of it. Now, he is a hard player to represent in game, I get that, because he is clearly a very good striker that just seems to make the wrong choices at the wrong times. So for me, if you are going to make Darwin Nunes accurate to real life, I'm fine with the physical attributes, I'm fine for his mental attributes too. He does make some good off the ball runs and work rate, but there is one that sticks out like a sore thumb, and that is decision making, maybe even composure too. That needs to go down to like 9, 10 maybe. His consistency should be made pretty low. I don't know what it is in the hidden attributes. 14 for consistency out of 20 is very high. That should be like 8 or 9 based on his real life performances currently. And his finishing, I could even argue, should be dropped a little bit to maybe a 12. That might be more fair that way. Maybe then Darwin Nunes will be a little bit more representative of how he is in real life. I know Liverpool fans love him. Again, like I say, I think he is a good striker. I just think for him to be that 25, 30 goal a season man in FM every season is a little bit of a stretch. Ansu Fati is another one that I think is a little bit overrated, both when it comes to his starting ability, but also his potential, which I think we've seen after this year for Brighton. I imagine he will be downgraded in FM25 because his season with the Seagulls wasn't great at all. De Zerbi overlooked him on many an occasion, but in game he is still on track to be one of the best players in the world, and already is a very, very good player. And clearly there is a talent there. We saw it at Barcelona before the injuries, but I think with everything that's happened to him, that potential needs to be lowered. The starting attributes need to be lowered too. Unless he somehow manages to recover over the next few seasons, I think Ansu Fati, whilst he might be a good player, is never going to quite hit the heights that we thought he may. And speaking of not hitting the heights, Beto is another player from Everton, another Everton striker that I think needs to be downgraded. Now, I understand why Sports Interactive did rate him pretty highly, because for Udinese, he looked pretty good in the 2 seasons he was there, not playing for the best team in the league, but managing to score a pretty decent number of goals. Moves to Everton on a big fee. SI rate him quite highly in game, but then in real life it just hasn't worked. I know it's only been 1 season for him so far at Everton, but he really did not do it. I think a lot of Everton fans might like his work rate and his industry, but just hasn't quite found the mark in front of goal. For that reason, I think his attributes need to be lowered next year. I'm sure they will be. He is in-game insane because of those physical attributes that he has, combined with a good finishing and really good mentals. He is an elite level forward in Football Manager, whereas in real life, I don't think he's necessarily done enough yet to be considered that level of player. Now, this next one might be a little bit controversial because I personally think Gabriel Jesus is a very good player in real life. Even as a Chelsea fan, I actually quite enjoy watching him for Arsenal. I love the way he plays, and he has been maybe not prolific in the last few seasons for his clubs at City or Arsenal, but he has scored a decent amount of goals, even if it's pretty much widely agreed by the Arsenal fan base that this guy isn't their striker going forward, and Arteta seems to have fed into that this season, not using him as often, or at least maybe not as the focal point of the team every single time. But either way, Jesus, as good of a player as he is in Football Manager, is insanely rated. I mean, he's got amazing attributes in every single area, and if you actually have a look in terms of current ability, I won't spoil it by showing you the in-game editor, but he is one of the highest rated players in all of FM, not just, you know, one of the best players at Arsenal or in the Premier League. You know, if we're talking Messi's, Ronaldo's, De Bruyne's, Jesus isn't quite in that level just yet, but in FM, if you look at the highest rated players, he is probably sitting, if I remember correct, like 25th, 27th, 28th. really, really highly rated. And I'm not saying he's not a good player, but he is not one of the world's best by any stretch. So for me, Gabriel Jesus needs a little bit of a downgrade next year. I also think Villarreal's Ben Brereton Diaz is another player that is overrated. His attributes aren't amazing in game, but I did a rebuild in Spain recently, bringing Malaga up from the 3rd division up to the top division. And, you know, 4 or 5 years in, I'm seeing this guy in his prime for Villarreal being one of the highest goal scorers in the league. In fact, one season he managed to bag 32 goals for a Villarreal team in the league alone, which is insane numbers, and I don't think he's personally capable of that. I know he has scored a lot in the Championship for Blackburn, particularly in that 21-22 season, and the year after he was very good too. And for some reason, even though his attributes don't look amazing, as good as they are, he just seems to be an elite level player in game, which I don't think he should be. And I'm going to finish off with a bit of a controversial one. Again, let me know in the comments down below who you think is the most overrated player, but I'm actually going to finish with Joe Bellingham, who, I'm not going to lie, I have not seen him a million times for Sunderland. I've actually only seen him a couple of times. I think one was in a cup competition. Now, Job clearly had a very good season for Sunderland. He was boosted in the winter update because of that by Sports Interactive. And he has obviously got a lot of promise and will probably go on to be a high-level Premier League player, even if he doesn't quite reach the heights of his brother. But the reason I think he is overrated in game is because after the winter update, despite us saying that he should be a fringe player at Sunderland, I actually think he will be their best player in game and actually one of the best players in the Championship. Again, I know he had a good season in the Championship, but his attributes now in game at age 17 kind of set him up to be, you know, one of the world's best midfielders down the line, because he's got great technicals, great mentals and great physicals, but at a level that you'd expect a mid-table Premier League player to have age 26, 27. And I don't quite think he's at that level just yet. Just to keep it in perspective as well, Archie Gray, who many people consider to be the best young player in the Championship, has just moved on to Tottenham for a lot of money. He's actually rated lower than Joe Bellingham was in game when it comes to current ability. So I'm not quite sure Joe Bellingham just yet should be this level. Another season or so of doing what he does at Sunderland, and maybe then these attributes will be fair, but I just think he's had too big of a jump. He should be a good, young, promising talent at Sunderland who has the potential to be a Premier League player, whereas right now in FM, he is a Premier League player already at a pretty good level, like a mid-table Premier League player with the potential to play for some of the biggest clubs in the world. And whilst he might go on to do that in real life like his brother, I'm not quite sure these attributes are fair just yet for Job, so I'm going to say he's overrated. But let me know what you think down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.